Hello everyone, it is me, Dr.bladekid. As a lot of you are aware, Cobalt Dragoon has recently fallen out of the meta a bit. Typically, you would use it as kind of like a safe pick. It's a really threatening option. Here's kind of how Goon works. 101 Goon is pretty much knowing how its matchups work, and pretty much the main concept is it wins with pretty much 100% consistency in its good matchups, if it gets the situation that it needs to. See, back in the day, you had Lightning Eldrago and you had Meteor Eldrago. Lightning came out, it had plastic dragons with an upper slope. You would scoop things up. It was extra good because it went to the left. So if you take a look at the stadium, these are the pockets right here. These are the walls. When you have a right spin Beyblade, it's going to be going that way pretty fast. Now a left spin Beyblade, it's going to be going that way. Basically, if you were good at countering positioning, left spin was great as an anti-attacker. Left spin gives you the advantage of having direct control over where you hit your attack opponent. Because they're constantly clashing into you by nature, if you learn to exploit that pattern, you can get way more direct attacks on them, both to counter them and to just attack a right spin. Now we gotta talk about Meteor Eldrago. Meteor was a whole different story. It had a similar design, having those upper dragons, but the whole thing is covered in rubber. It's pretty light as far as things go. Lightning Eldrago is pretty light as far as things go, and it's actually lighter than Meteor. Most of the vulnerability to attack comes in the way it's built. This is the combo that's typically used. There's different variations of it. The way that this combo worked is that the rubber would still spin, and the tip that was wide on that low setup would basically let it spin for an extremely long time in the late game specifically. In Beyblade, you kind of have two kinds of stamina. You have same spin stamina and opposite spin stamina. Same spin typically relies on consistent shapes, aerodynamicy, outward weight to try to maximize the solo spin time and to minimize the recoil taken. Oftentimes, if you want consistency, you will have a ball-shaped tip. Balls are basically omnidirectional shapes, so that any way they tilt, they're getting a similar amount of surface area and therefore keeping consistent stamina. You pair that with something with a lot of high raw solo stamina and you got yourself a deal. If you look right here, this is a stamina equation. If one Beyblade has 1 minute and 30 seconds of spin time and this one has 2 minutes of spin time, one will lose. I don't really mean raw solo spin time 2 minutes, I more mean in battle effectiveness. I mostly just picked numbers to kind of demonstrate my point. While the things that make a good stamina tip are pretty easy to kind of find, equalizers are a lot trickier. They basically rely on a few different things. Equalizer stamina doesn't go for raw spin time. That's not helpful when you are equalizing the amount of spin you have. What you're trying to maximize is the longevity of the fall. Essentially, the goal is to get your opponent right to the end of the spin and then watch as they fall over because they're on a thin, narrow tip. Most tips are pretty thin and narrow. If we take a look at the main 4 types of tips, you kind of notice they don't go very much beyond their shape. They're mostly just meant to have a shape that interacts with the ground and have a pattern. Flats move around fast, needles stay in place, balls kind of move around, they have a consistent flow, I guess. Taper, definitely aggressive, but it tilts kind of like ball and kind of like needle. But none of this works in an opposite spin context. They all kind of fall over similarly at around the same speeds. Flat can kind of help. It has more surface area to the ground, keeping it upright for longer. Ball can kind of help because it has more surface area around and is stable. Needle kind of fucking sucks at that concept. And taper is, either way, they're not really built for that. What is built for that are things that are really wide. They would typically have some kind of gimmick that lets them either not fall over or have a slide. You're typically looking for weird shape synergies. You're kind of looking to find parts to line up together. Metal Fight's robust height system with all these super tiny builds makes it very easy to make something stable that doesn't fall over when one of the main tips they have is wide defense. As implied, it is quite wide. What that tip can do is it can make it so it's stable on that wide flat surface. It's able to kind of rest there. However, in X, things don't really work like that. You have Hexa. That's kind of like this. The issue is Hexa not only isn't wide enough, but it's also quite tall just because that's how the bits are. Hexa can actually work on things like Wizard Rod due to its wide shape, providing enough outward weight and slowing the rotation enough to make that really last. But it's not quite viable for the goons. Zap is another good tip, but it also kind of relies on rod's wideness to function. Zap is kind of a shorter, wider version of point because it is so wide. It can rest on these sides here. However, again, you need something quite balanced and quite stable, and something to slow its rotation is also nice. Wizard Rod Zap, I actually made a video on that. Can be good as a goon counter. Level can do a very similar thing to Zap, and essentially create a wide plate for the goons to rest on. This is used on various combos. Rod level, Blastwheel, 770 level is one of my favorite goon counters. It actually uses the angles that are kind of weird on 7 to line up with the bevel of level and the kind of corners of wheel, and it basically makes for a pretty insane sliding effect. A good rule of thumb when looking for equalizer setups: if you can get a Beyblade to slide for a pretty good amount of time after it's fallen over, you might have a good setup for equalizer. Though there are more factors. You have two main things that determine your opposite spin stamina. This is just talking about specifically the tip part. Precession is basically the wobbling on the axis. For example, if you notice level resting on its plate and stabilizing on that, that's a good example of precession. It's not falling over, it hasn't started sliding yet. It's more just slowing its fall by having a wider surface to wobble on. Hexa does this as well for Wizard Rod. Back in Burst, you had Atomic that did that. Some Beyblades genuinely have good enough precession to not need to tap into life after death in a traditional sense, but one could argue that is just precession in life after death. Typically, it's stuff that doesn't fall over. This is what wall bearing basically is. You have a big overhang and you have a bearing performance tip. This freely rotating plate is able to have its center of gravity lowered significantly by the plate to the point where it can just rest on that plate and the wall will keep it stable. It won't fall over. But either way, it's hard to say if this ever stops processing technically, and that brings us into life after death. The life after death is the extra little bit of movement and sliding you can get at the end of battles when you've fallen over. The best example of this, pretty much the only example of this, is Elevate. Most bays kind of stop due to the ratchets, or they kind of just spin out on the ground. Typically the friction of spinning on the ground stops them. However, if you have some sort of wide plate, some way to avoid taking a lot of ground friction, or just interesting geometry that lines up well, it's going to be very helpful for winning those opposite spin matches more consistently. The longer you can kind of keep going means the longer you can kind of keep steal and spin. Aside from edge cases, the best example of raw life after death that we have in X is the infamous Elevate driver. You have this plate that has like a little angled bit on it. What that does is it causes you to slide around when you fall. This has been used in the infamous Cobalt Dragoon. A lot of people would use the 560 ratchet because it has a lot of weight. It's also the fact that the gap size is around the same size as the contact point itself. This gives it very even weight distribution. It can help with goon stability. My choice, however, has always been 960. This part right here is 960. It has 9 sides. It's very smooth, and you'll notice that it kind of has this kind of triangular shape as well. Yeah, if you look, chat, you kind of have this shape here, and that smoothness you can kind of see lines up pretty well with this edge of Elevate, meaning that when it falls, it can often slide around with the 960 for some pretty consistent extra life after death. When you combine both precession and life after death, you can make a lot of really good things happen. Cobalt has a more evened out, 4-sided shape. 4 of the hooks go up and the other 4 go down. This means if it's lower or on an even level with the opponent, the jagged hooks that stick up are going to spin steal a little bit. If you look underneath the layer, there are 4 little bits of metal, and unfortunately only 2 of them are filled in. That means it does have an imbalance, and it does suffer because of this. It being generally less stable than most of the popular stamina and defense blades in the game means that it needs something like Elevate to kind of overcompensate. When you use Rod on Hexa, for example, it actually kind of evens out the playing field. Technically, Cobalt Dragoon can win against Rod Hexa, but it's bad for 2 reasons. If you want to consistently outspin Wizard Rod Hexa as Cobalt Dragoon Elevate, you definitely need at least a pretty good amount of spin. Typically with attack types, you can get away with a low to medium launch, that way you don't have to really risk going crazy or bursting. But against Wizard Rod Hexa, you do have to launch pretty hard. This can lead to not only self-KOs from hitting the rail, but just self-bursts in general. Elevate on something that isn't super stable tends to wiggle around on the X-rail, and it causes more burst than you'd expect. The second part It's not consistent. It's hard to say if it's exactly a 50-50. It kind of depends on both the balance of the Wizard Rod and the balance of the Cobalt Dragoon, along with ratchet choice and all sorts of other stuff. But generally, it's winnable, and I usually win it pretty well. It's just not worth it. You can just use Rod Hexa if it's gonna be a 50-50, you know what I'm saying? And if you have the element of supplies, aka you have a lot of Wizard Rods, you could definitely get it balanced. Bringing a Beyblade like Cobalt Dragoon to the arena when it's not going to be consistent against one of the big things it's supposed to counter, Wizard Rod and stamina in general, it just means it's not really worth going for. You're going to have Wizard Rod Hexa, maybe a Blast level, and maybe Hover, maybe Shark. It's not really worth it aside from counter picking someone you know isn't going to run a lot of that stuff. Even someone who wants to run attack is probably going to be running Shark or Hover. That's not that bad compared to Rod Hexa or Wheel Blast level, but it's still not something you would want to go for. Especially since Rod's going to steal 1 point, Hover and Shark are going to probably steal 2. Alright, so now that we've talked about Cobalt, let's talk about Meteor. Meteor is a homage to Meteo El Drago. It's got a really cool design. It has both rubber and glittery glossy white paint. But unfortunately, if you look at the shape, it's just really uneven. It's not really super balanced, unfortunately. This actually ends with Meteor being the aggressive one instead of Cobalt. You'd think with all the rubber and the homage to Meteo that they'd make it more of a spin stealer. But not only is it heavier, but it's more unbalanced, so it's clearly going for a more attack design. But you see, fellas, I'm Dr.bladekid. I didn't have the luxury of Takara Tomy Beyblades back when I was a competitive little sprout in Burst. So I had to figure out how to make do. And that meant making a lot of stupid, dumb things into equalizers that shouldn't be equalizers. So what I'm saying is, despite the fact that everyone's saying it's not good for equalizing and it's mainly for attack on something like level, I made it into a spin stealer. And I made it in 5 seconds. It was obvious. But yes, we were gonna get onto that combo right about now. Like and subscribe. Maybe I'll have content. If you have your hot takes, I'll leave it in the hot take video because I'm still doing that. But yeah, without further ado, let's check out that Meteor combo. Hello y'all, it is time. It's time for me to test out my Meteor build. So Meteor El Drago, or whatever the hell this is called. Meteor Dragoon. So Meteor Dragoon, a lot of people have been saying it doesn't equalize super well, but here's kind of my sauce with it. This right here, 080 Elevate. Basically, you want it tall because the rubber is low. That way the rubber can make contact. Elevate is good, of course, for opposite spin, but it's especially good with the 080 disc in this context. Now, not only does it want to be tall, and that is good, a lot of people run it like 770, but the other reason it's good is because this taper here, the taper of like the bevel of this edge lines up super duper well with the bevel of 0, if you can see that right there. You can kind of see that there's like that taper lines up super duper perfectly, and so you actually get some very crazy life after death with it. And because it's tall and it's really heavy, it's able to destabilize from above. But yeah, it can have some pretty crazy life after death if it doesn't touch the rubber. And even if it does, it's not too bad. The big thing that I think may be an issue is bursting. This thing may burst because it's tall. But if you have a tight 080, which I definitely do, and you're diligent with keeping your launches kind of weaker and tilting, you can kind of get away with a lot. 080 is pretty smooth, and because of the 80 core part here, like the white piece, it actually defends the overhang a pretty good amount. It can get into that overhang, but it can't get in nearly as deep as like 060, for example. Yeah. If you look, something can get all the way in here, like all the way down, even into the bit, and still like contact. Whereas this stops it kind of at a small nub contact point. But yeah, so we're gonna test this against a variety of combos. So let's get into it. Alright, so we're gonna start off with something kind of normal, kind of easy probably. I'm hoping it can beat this. If it can't beat this, then that's rough. Silverwolf 960 Wedge. It's got some good late game, a little bit of sliding, but it shouldn't be beating anything like Goon. Normal Goon like Goon Combo. So, we'll see, we'll see. Should be a softball. I want like a mid-powered launch just to see. Don't want too much recoil. Yeah, see what I mean? Silverwolf usually destabilizes, but because Goon is so heavy, it's able to knock down. Let me tell you about one of the biggest downsides of being left spin if you are not a good equalizer. It's that you have to be an equalizer. You have to equalize. Things steal spin off you now. You become the thing that gets all its spin stolen. So it basically means if you don't get your attacks down, you're super screwed. Alright. Yeah. See, that's the outcome it's supposed to have. I'll go harder on the launch here, and I'll do a tilt. So I'm not doing insane launches with this, but a little weaker than before, but still harder than the other ones. Yeah, well, this definitely won that. Maybe a prediction I'll make right now, because it does have that kind of thing where it can steal spin, but does have that instability. It might get kind of equally close to beating the opponent regardless of setup. And it may be able to beat anything, but inconsistent against anything. And also being able to lose to anything. Obviously, it'll have a harder time with, like, maybe Rod Hexa, but it won't be, like, as much harder compared to, like, standard equalization. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. But with that kind of system, we may see something like that. That's a prediction I'll make right now. Easy. Easy dub. You know, I have a lot of joint problems, and part of me is suspecting that maybe I got, like, microplastic poisoning. Yeah, okay. See that, lad? It's the freaking, like, it lines up so well. It's like the whole, like, Blastwheel level with 770 thing that lines up. The good news is that it does hit hard. Like, it does hit pretty hard. It's kind of at a disadvantage with specifically Silverwolf Wedge because this whole gimmick is kind of being hit down and wanting to wedge into the ground. But still being able to carry it is good. And I'm using, like, very little power. Yeah, that's what happens when you launch, like, super weak. Super launch. Flat launch. I'm hoping that the weight and, like, the height kind of exacerbating the weight and exaggerating it will help elevate stay in and help it stay in the stadium when it goes crazy like that. Maybe it's just hard launching is the way to go. Though it kind of depends. It kind of depends. Hard flat launch. I did a mid-flat launch. So It's human. It is human. It can burst. So that could be because Silver Wolf kind of sets things up. But we'll see. We'll see. The weaker flat launch. And it's doing sad things. But here's the thing. Because it's coming from the top, like, a higher point in the stadium, because it's a bowl, so the middle is more shallow, it's striking more directly with the lever when it comes down, so it's stealing a lot of spin when it does that. So even if it's spinning around, losing stamina, nice. It may be getting more spin initially. I guess this is my dummy to see the launch, because if you mess up the launch, it'll lose. But if you do the launch right, it'll win. So I just weak flat launch. We're gonna see how long this lasts. Nice. A little bit of power. Actually, that was pretty fucking weak. That was not good. The thing is, you can launch weaker to kind of increase your stability in a sense. You won't be shaking as much because you're not spinning as fast. So you can technically do like a weak launch. So, okay. For things like this that are more stationary and you're kind of guaranteed to outspin them if you just make good contact and stay stable, I'm sure you could just do like a weaker flat launch. Don't gotta go crazy with like an angle. You might throw yourself more off balance. This way you can just... See, this is the thing. It's not stable, but it's... I don't know how to describe it. It's clearly able to sit in the center and work. Yeah, this one won by a pretty significant nose. Alright, let's try the next Beyblade. Phoenix Wing 760 low flat. This may give it trouble on the attack, but this is supposed to have a really good anti-attack because it's left spin, so it's not risking as much burst directly because you're launching it weaker and it's going this way. Obviously, it's still a liability, especially just the bit too, but I want to see... It's going to be a little hard to do these tests. Alright, so we got this system going on here. Battle Pass with stability, but I might take it off. But we're just going to do like a normal flat launch. This would be an easy clap for me to do. If it's not, then I'm gonna eat my hat. That's bullshit. That's not my fault. That's bullshit. That's 760 fucking chugging along. I'll do kind of a weak launch with those, just to kind of simulate late game battle. Let's say you did survive. Okay, yeah. That's more or less what's supposed to happen. This thing seems to be very fluke prone. However, if you are better at kind of connecting your like spin ceiling in like an actual battle against people, it may be more reliable. I'm gonna do a little angle in, and it's gonna be harder. There was mid-air there, but we're gonna see. Oh, see, this is the situation I want to see. The rubber does seem to shock absorb, which is what I hoped on anti-attack. And with like the weight, and again the height is definitely the thing that's the worst about it in most situations, just because you do get upward more. But in here, it's a little bit worth the trade-off, because obviously the rubber, obviously, and like you're in left spin, so shape often matters more. I did it pretty weak. This will be dangerous and spooky scary, but I'm gonna do it. Yeah, there we go. Oh, and it even did a little slide there at the end. I did a different tilt that time. I don't know if y'all noticed. I tilted kind of this way. Oh, come back from this. No, I can't. That'd be cool. That'd be cool if I could. It seems to be pretty definitively winning if it does get into... I also tilted slightly this way to try to make it in Phoenix's favor as far as positioning. Because I want Goon to have a hard time. I want Goon to struggle a little bit. Oh yeah. This seems to have both better spin stealing and better life after death, like better slide, than Goon E, but that one has a lot better spin sustain, which matters. Definitely matters. It's able to stay up, like upright a lot longer and maintain spin a lot better. Nice, 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 nice. I got this launcher, so I can launch without my current launcher. I'm not gonna go open a Goon pack just for this. See that because that was a perfect setup. I want to see if I can just launch it to be kind of passive. Oh, that's bullshit. I can't believe I just hit the stand. That's so sad. Now for the disclaimer, I don't think this is gonna work. I'm sure it's either gonna just be KO'd or not, you know, not a left. Okay, okay. Hitting the rubber definitely does seem to do a lot of good. Yeah, baby, yeah. Even with a really weak launch, it seems to be able to win. At least, clearly consistently enough. I'll do a few more with this, and then I want to get on to the next bay. I'm going to slightly launch this fella. See, if you get the pattern down well enough, you can, like, you could launch to try to intercept their pattern. So they're trying to go, like, this way, but you're, like, going this way. So you just keep hitting them and, like, stopping them from going anywhere. And just completely kill their momentum. So, yeah, I think that's pretty good. I'll do one more battle with them together on the same launcher. Okay, one more. Yeah, that downward hit. That downward hit. It's quite good. And it goes hard. Alright, so this is probably going to be more of a spicy challenge style type of thing for it. Hover Wyvern 360 kick. I like 360 because it has more outward momentum, and I also just like it because it's more balanced than any of my 960s. Also because this part lines up with at least one of the contact points. Either way, I like it on 360. I have not really tried it on kick, but everyone says it's the best on kick. So I'm going to give that the word of the day. As done before, I'm going to do it with the double launcher. Let's go. just didn't hit? Is that the worst? So, Goon may have an easier time with this matchup because it's heavier, but it might have a harder time because Hubble is better against opposite spin. So, alright, that's 1 point to Goon Master. Alright, so Hubble bursts it pretty efficiently if it's launched hard. Let's see what happens if I launch Goon in there and then I try to launch the other guy. Oh, that was a good test. Oh, hold on, let's see this, let's see. Oh, it won. So now I'm low-key interested. What does this thing do in this situation? Because this is the old Goon. It's supposed to be more consistent. And it's supposed to be better at spin stealing. Or like equalizing, I guess. I think the other Goon is better at spin stealing, actually stealing the spin. But this one holds on to it better, so it's probably better for keeping it equal to the opponent. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Yeah, you kind of see how it can't really steal spin as well, but it could stay up longer with no contact. It feels so weird to use this Goon now, because it's like the weird jagged metal one. Okay. So interesting. That's interesting. You kind of saw how it wasn't really stealing spin. It was just sustaining. It was stealing spin. Don't get me wrong, it was. But it was only stealing a little bit of spin. Most of what it was getting was off of its own stamina. It probably doesn't have more stamina, but it's probably more stable. And it probably has more stamina because it's more stable. But it probably doesn't have inherently better stamina. It's just because it's more stable. If that makes sense. A hard launch this. And then... yeah! I'll get that drop ski. Get the drop on him! Yeah. If that didn't get a KO, I would have been disappointed in how they were doing. The old characters, they gotta shine too. I want to get a better launch against it though. I'll do a little more powerful. I'll do a tilt launch. I'll do a reverse tilt launch. Yeah, that thing. It clearly, okay, like it clearly slides farther too. Like, look at this. Look at this. Right? That's the life evidence of that. Clearly more stable, clearly more sustained. But you saw how the slide stopped short? Stopped a little earlier? This had like a slower woo, you know what I mean? That's because of the 080 elevate. If this thing works on 080 elevate, I'll get my fucking flex tape. So let me try that real quick, just to see. It shouldn't because it doesn't want to be tall. It does want to be shorter. Not short than the opponent, but shorter. As in not taller. I'll give it something that's actually hard for normal Goon. It can't steal spin as well. let's see. Will it actually be able to beat the mighty Hexa? It did. It didn't have the lag. It actually kind of just pushed it down. I won't get on this rabbit trail for too long. That's bullshit. It could also just be that 080 is really stable and is kind of helping the stability of Meteor. Like with the overhang it has, I mean. So we're gonna try this, and then against this. And this is 660 Goon, so this should be optimal, basically. Did a pretty weak powered launch. You might have to go stronger. That's the thing. We're gonna go with Meteor. Just see how it goes. Oh, and that, against Rod is the time it goes fucking crazy for the first time ever. Okay. That's an outlier though, folks. Let's try that again. That one won. Again, that's a pocket popper. I like how it... I really like how it is. Prime grade, prime lid bullshit. Damn. No, that a little bit harder and it popped. Good to know. Good to know. A little bit more power. Doesn't have the Meteor sustain though. I might just switch to this. See how that goes. Oh, we'll see. Oh, okay. There you go. Alright, weaker. Maybe Rod doesn't win at lower spins because this is not spinning faster enough to just be too smooth to spin steal off of easily. Or this may lose because it's less stable, where this can be way more stable with less spin. We'll see. Or to be a KO. Or a burst. Okay. Right there. Launching hard or hardly launching, you know what I'm saying? And just so you're aware, this is a pretty balanced 160 hex. So far it's pretty consistent. This was looking horrible for Goon a second ago, but I didn't say anything. Now it's looking good for it. Rod 1. That was by a fucking significant margin, that one. I want to try a super duper unga bunga launch with Wizard Rod to see if I can cheese it. Okay, if I do like a super hard launch and then weak launch with Goon, it's not gonna work. So the good news is you don't need to launch that hard with it. I think using a string launcher is going to give you more control with the amount of power you give, so you can kind of gauge your power a little bit better with it. Power zone. I didn't launch super hard, but I launched a little bit harder. Interesting. Could have been a tie. Again, this one's really deceptive with how it just sneaks out a little tiny spin, just because that's kind of its gimmick. That was deeper, but a little bit higher than it burst. Going. You might not be able to hear it, but I can hear it clanking on around. See, that's what I mean. I believe Goon won that, by the way. But it's by such a small little metric, I don't know if a lot of people would notice in tournament. And I don't want to be arguing with the judge over something. Okay. Put a little angle on it. Alright, interesting. So if they hard launch with Rod Hexa, it may be rough. You may have to go for a KO. You may have to do this thing called launch well and play the game. Yeah, that was Goon for sure. I'll clean up with a few more, and then I'm gonna get onto some more. Actually, there's one final boss after Rod Hexa. Nice. Now, I will say this with a little grain of salt. I'm doing this with a ripcord launcher, a left spin ripcord launcher. I'm not familiar with ripcord launchers. Not only that, but this one has a crooked cord, which I'm also not quite familiar with. Actually, I have a normal one I can sub in real quick to see if that helps the consistency. Just because it adds extra resistance when the cord is like bent. Oh, that's significantly smoother. I might be able to cook with this. I'm trying to find the right balance of like spin power for longevity, but I don't want to be too aggressive with it. So with that in mind, I'm wondering how it's going to do against the next thing, which is this. I mentioned this earlier, but if you look here, you get a slide. So let's see how it goes. They're both mobile now, so we're going to get some nice out of this. Blast is good unless it gets knocked off balance, but that might happen in a matchup like this. Again, left spin becoming evil. That was Meteor. Oh, let's see this. Let's see the spin stealing. Come on, the little 080 that could. Damn. That was almost good. All right, let's see this. Oh, that was flipping over. I want to count that as a blast winning, but I don't know. Yeah, see, this is some old staller tactic BS. Blast got it. That looks like Blast, but it also kind of looked tie-ish. Damn, that's such good lag. Both of these do. The issue is one is very stable and one is very not. Okay, it won there. It won there for sure. This is a combo. 360 jolt. Again, 360 for that outward weight distribution. This might be one of the easiest matchups for the new game. I try this on a little bit of low rush. Goon won that. Slid further. Like again, unless that some orgs don't count that as a game, it should be because it is still spinning in the same direction as it started without flipping over or stopping or like rocking back and forth. It's winning that like it is sliding, it's still just extending its rotation. It's not like it's hitting part of the ratchet and like tilting a little bit more. It is just sliding. Yeah, that one by a pretty good nose. I'm gonna try stock scale because I like stock scale. People say it's ass, but I like stock scale. People say it scrapes. Yeah, see, under flat is good. Launch it hard. This is just gonna be like the normal Goon. It may actually be a little bit harder to use, but in my experience right now, it seems to be better, at least more versatile. On this setup, I mean. With other stuff, it might be different. Your mileage may vary, but the way I feel is that, like, you can outspin pretty much whatever. It may be harder for some things, and it may be inconsistent. So, this is the same matchup I did earlier. However, with the other stuff, I was testing more than just Rod Hexa. So I needed to have a dual launcher for the more aggressive matchups because I can't really launch this first and then launch things at it. So for 3 out of the 5 matchups I was testing, I kind of needed a dual launcher. So my string launcher was used up. If I wanted to do solo, I had to do it with a whipcord. I'm not very familiar with it. Basically, we're going to see if I can cook. So with the string launcher, I'm going to be able to gauge my power and I'm going to be able to hit angles better. So it's probably gonna lead to both harder launches and more consistent launches, but this is more balanced, so we're gonna see more worst case scenario. I'm doing this at a higher frame rate so we can see it better when I slow it down. Okay. One that time. Nice. Oh, did it burst? No, it's still hard to say on that one. Good. That shit went crazy in Stano style. Neat. I was looking pretty scary for Goon there, but it pulled through. That lad is crazy. Get down to the wire. Let's try something different. I'm gonna try 070. It has a similar taper lineup, but it's not as tall for spin stealing, though it may not be as vulnerable. Yeah, it did get this. Let's check the lag on that. Yeah, it's still crazy. Nice, nice. Its league's more stable on 0.70. Not right at 1. Alright, this is where it gets serious. Oh, it won by a fucking super margin. I was gonna say, if it won that, that would be on some crazy shit. We get the point, 0.70. No need to show off. Yeah, a little bit worse on the slide, a little higher chance for the rubber to occur. Yeah, the 0.70 Elevate build seems to have similar amounts of lag, definitely a little bit less, but it seems to be more stable. So, Bladers, what'd you think? Yeah, I know. I'm the Goon Master. Thank you for watching all the testing, getting all the way to this part of the video. Hope you liked the combo, guys. I'm pretty happy. During the ripcord launching, I was not super sold on it because it was losing a lot. But when I tested it out in person, I knew that it was gonna cook because I could actually launch well. So going back afterwards and doing that final round hexa testing was definitely worth it in my opinion. Not to mention, the 0.70 build, oh, it might actually be even better than the 0.80 build. It's lower for less burst risk, and it's more stable just from being lower. It doesn't quite get the crazy slides of 0.80, but that's often overkill, and it often falls earlier in those situations that it's sliding more, so it might be better to avoid those bigger slides and just keep the stability. Either way you slice it, I think this build is insane. It does take a while to get used to, especially if you're not used to left spins, and if you want a really insane build. Meteor Dragoon, rubber a cell. You put it on like 770 or something like that. Try to get it to have a slide as much as possible. 0.80 was okay. 0.70 was mid. 970 was okay. Either way, just try to mess around with it. It was an absolute tank. The only issue is it failed to outspin a lot. The anti-attack portion on Elevate specifically gets a lot better when you have in-person people to fight. You do have to launch it really well against attack, but when you're not in solo testing, it does a lot better in that application. Hopefully I'll make something on Mummy Curse, because Mummy Curse is easily one of my new favorite Beyblades. So, overall, I think Meteor Dragoon is a really fun blade, and it's cool that a lot of people are enjoying it on attack. I will continue to enjoy using it as a spin stealer. Thank you guys very much. Like and subscribe. Dr.bladekid, heading back to the lab.